partly my upbringing and who knows, previous life, whatever, some sense that there's a higher reality. I know that deep in my heart, I'm confident, I'm convinced. Second, what it is, I don't know. It's good to know what you don't know. And then the third is I want to know. In Sanskrit, I didn't know any Sanskrit. Tato Brahma Jigyasa, the first aphorism of Vedanta Sutra. Ataha, ya is now is the time. Achieving this human form of life is the time to be inquisitive into Brahman, Brahma Jigyasa. I didn't know what I was doing. I want to know. Tato Brahma Jigyasa. That was the starting point. And then things happen and things happen and things happen. Because I was inquisitive. If you're not inquisitive, something can just bonk you on the head and you still don't know what it is. But if you're inquisitive, something happens. The something that happens is the source of everything recognizes within the heart that you're inquisitive and we want to know Brahman. So there's reciprocation. One of the reciprocations was Bhagavad Gita. Another was the teacher who wrote Bhagavad Gita as it is. But just a little further sharing. The first Bhagavad Gita I got was from a philosophy professor. He just gave me a copy. I don't know why he gave me that. He just gave it to me. And then when somebody saw me carrying Bhagavad Gita around, they said, oh, I have one, but it's a different copy. So they gave me their copy, which was a different version. So here I am, this college kid, asking the question, what's that higher reality? And then here's these two Bhagavad Gitas. And I thought it was a book of poetry because the one that gave me the book first time was a philosophy professor that liked poetry. He would read poetry that he had written and we would discuss poetry, and I thought it was a book of poetry. But it wasn't a book of poetry. And then, it got a little light went on, said, look, if there's two, then there's probably more, and went to the library, the university library, and found there are 5 additional translations. So I checked out all 5. I read 7 translations of Bhagavad Gita and came to 2 conclusions. Not a book of poetry. And I don't know what it is. I don't know what it says. I don't understand it. Time passed. Somebody gave me version number 8. And I started reading number 8. And it was easy to understand. I was puzzled. Why is this easy to understand and the others aren't so easy to understand? But I kept reading because I liked it. And as I was reading, I came to understand why it was easy to understand. Because its message of Bhagavad Gita is meant to be achieved by descending knowledge, not ascending knowledge. Very simple. You don't look for the sun with a flashlight. The sun is self-luminous. You don't need a flashlight to find the sun. You don't need intellectual acumen to discern the message of Bhagavad Gita. It doesn't give you entrance into the message of Bhagavad Gita. It remains a mystery like the first 7. And then one that's descending, that is easy to understand. Very easy to understand. So we're having a technology glitch. Yes, no, maybe. You a technology guy? You want to make it work? Hey, magic nonsense. Maybe you should unplug yours, replug it. Okay, I'll just carry on as if everything's normal. So as I began reading Bhagavad Gita, I didn't know anything about anything, but I started to understand that Bhagavad Gita is teaching about higher consciousness. It's teaching a path to come in contact with that higher reality, or the absolute truth, or Brahman, para Brahman, in fact. So all of that is some background about the word bhakti. In the Bhagavad Gita, starting with chapter 2, we find a series of yoga systems, starting with Sankhya Yoga, Buddha Yoga, Karma Yoga, Gyan Yoga, Dhyan Yoga, and finally Bhakti Yoga. That's the sequence that's in the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita. And at the end of the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the Dhyan, meditation yoga, or Ashtanga Yoga, the Eightfold Yoga system, it says, Krishna says, that the topmost of all the yoga systems is bhakti. And keeping it very simple, bhakti has 2 parts, what the mind does and what the body does. Like in really simple language. Mind absorbed in me, engaged always in my devotional service. This is the topmost of all yoga systems. Topmost of all yoga systems. So what the mind does and what the body does is important, because we all have minds. Sometimes they give us a problem. Sometimes to make us feel happy, sometimes to make us feel not happy. Sukha dukkha. With this, the nature of this world is there's happiness and the distress. There's winter and summer season. There's honor and the dishonor. We're in a place of duality where there's this, there's that. There's day and there's night. There's a place of opposites, place of duality, and the picture keeps changing. It doesn't stay. Prakriti keeps moving, and what moves Prakriti is time. Time is an energy of Krishna. So that all these things are described in Bhagavad Gita, but time moves. Time moves in cycles, just like day and night. That's a cycle. Or the seasons, the 4 seasons. That's another cycle, and then that makes 4 seasons make 1 year, and those so many years make the decade, make the century, make he goes bigger cycles. And there's creation and cosmic annihilation. That's a really big cycle. But time moves, so time moves Prakriti. And we're going along for the ride. Sometimes it's this, and sometimes it's that. It's the place of duality, sometimes and sometimes. And it's not a natural condition. And that's this question. There is another reality, isn't it? And each of us, I'll make a reasonable assumption. Each of us have the basic assumption that there is a higher reality. Exactly what the higher reality is, we may have different ideas. We may be honest and say what we don't really know, and that there's different responses to the question. But asking the question is really important. Brahma Jigyasa is very important. Then the picture of Bhagavad Gita is the yoga ladder is meant to take us to closer and closer and closer, in stages closer to that ultimate reality, or para Brahman. And the access to para Brahman is through the medium of bhakti. All of this is just to discuss the topic of bhakti. Now, what's showing on my screen, but not over here, is the topic that I wanted to speak about today. True humility precedes true bhakti. We'll say it again. True humility precedes true bhakti. And I'll just share something with all of you. Some of you know. I During the Thanksgiving holiday, I was in Houston, Texas, and I spent several hundred hours preparing for a seminar that had 14 parts discussing bhakti. So it's based upon two verses from one of our predecessor acharyas named Rupa Goswami, who wrote a book on the science of bhakti, and he describes two verses describe the stages of bhakti. There's stages of yoga, and then within top, bhakti is the topmost, and there's 9 stages of bhakti, awakening. And it begins with some faith, adau shraddha, but faith in what? Because we all have faith. You can't walk across the floor without faith that the floor is going to hold your weight. Or anything that you do. You breathe air, you drink water, you lata, bija. Bija means seed. And the bhakti creeper, bhakti lata, starts with this seed. And the seed is something that happens together with some preliminary faith or some humility. Like I'm looking up at something that's above me, this higher reality that's above me. And I'm down here and I'm not there. But I want to be there. I want to be connected. I want to be linked with or in yoga, in harmony with the divine. I want. And so I wanted to read a verse. Look at this. Now we're full screen. And on the right side, there's a nice painting. And this is the verse from Canto 3, Chapter 29, Srimad Bhagavatam. This is Srimad Bhagavatam. This is one part of the third canto. The third canto has 2 of these. Thick, 12 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam. It's the natural commentary by the author of Vedanta Sutra, who was Vyasadeva, explaining Vedanta Sutra in his own words, describing Parabrahman. So the person pictured in this painting on the screen here, on the far right, that's Kapila Dev, Lord Kapila. Lord Kapila. Don't mess. Can you hear back there? Maybe you put the mic up here. That's better? Okay. Thank you. I don't want to hear that screeching sound again. Okay. Well, you can come forward. That's an alternative besides put the microphone closer to my mouth. You can hear better now. Okay, good. Okay. But you probably have a hard time seeing the screen, right? You can see the screen. Fantastic. It's a big screen. Okay. So I'm explaining the personality on the right. His name is Lord Kapila. Lord Kapila is an avatar of Vishnu. Avatar means, besides the movie, avatar means in Sanskrit, one who descends from the spiritual to the material realm. One who descends, avatar. So Lord Kapila is an avatar of Vishnu. He comes into this world. There's some history of how that came to be, but he's the son of Devahuti. That's his mother on the left side. And Devahuti knows there's details of how that happened, but she knows that her son is Vishnu. Imagine those of you who are mothers knowing that your son is Vishnu. That's pretty unusual. But she was a very qualified personality, Devahuti. She was the daughter of Swayambhuva Manu. She's a very elevated personality. So she's asking her son spiritual questions. I mean, the essential topic is, I'm here in the material world because of affinity for being an enjoyer of the material world. How do I overcome this affinity for being the enjoyer of the temporary and instead connect with the eternal? Same question I was asking as a college kid. She's just asking it in a more sophisticated way. And so Kapila is giving nice instructions, and he gives different. Those of you that have been around for a while, you know he's well known for being in detail elaborating on Sankhya Yoga. Sankhya Yoga, Kapila Dev, one of the systems of yoga. But the fruit of Sankhya is Bhakti. In fact, the fruit of any of the systems of yoga. You keep going and keep going and keep going, and that fruit of that yoga system becomes Bhakti, if it matures nicely. So he's describing, there's a verse on the screen, and I think I'm just going to, all of this, for those of you interested, what Kapila taught to Devahuti is being narrated over here on the left side, way up in the Himalayas. It's being narrated by Maitreya to Vidura. Now, probably everybody here in the room knows who Vidura is. He's one of the three brothers, Dhritarashtra, Pandu, and Vidura. Vidura was the youngest of the three brothers, but he was the wisest of the three brothers. And he was respected by his blind elder brother, Dhritarashtra. He always listened to him because he's very wise. At a certain point, Vidura went on pilgrimage. One of the places he went was, as you see in the painting, way up in the Himalayas. We visited the place. It's a nice place. Way up in the Himalayas. We went on the yatra with a group of us. And there Vidura was asking questions of Maitreya, great sage, learned person. And Maitreya is narrating histories from Swayambhuva Manu and then his daughter Devahuti and her son Kapila. And so he's narrating history. It's Purana. It's a history. But that's the background. Now I want to read something. Here's the translation of the verse. A devotee should always try to hear about spiritual matters and should always utilize his time in chanting the holy name of the Lord. His behavior should always be straightforward and simple, and although he is not envious but friendly to everyone, he should avoid the company of persons who are not spiritually advanced. There's a few details just to unpack the verse itself. This is way back in the very beginning of creation. It's the beginning of Satya Yuga, And we should know that chanting of the holy name wasn't just for Kali Yuga. Chanting of the holy name right here mentioned is in Satya Yuga, in all the yugas, in all times, but it's especially important because of its simplicity for the present age, because complexity and spiritual life are too difficult for people of this age. So something very, very simple is best to help them at least get a foothold and then go further and further and further. But continuing to chant the holy name because it's all powerful and pure. Then mentioned as being straightforward and simple. And then mentioned as selecting association. So ideal is to respect all living entities, never be envious of any living entity, but friendly to all living entities. At the same time, being a little selective about with those with whom we regularly associate, make like close, bring close to our hearts and close to our lives. And because it's true and it's stated in Bhagavad Gita, a very simple thing. Those with whom you associate, you take on qualities like those with whom you associate. Those of you that are parents, some of you are parents, you're concerned about who your children associate with because good children can become spoiled by bad association. It's true. It happens. Maybe some of it has happened to some of you, but it's so Sangat Sanjayate Kama. Sangha and Kama. Kama, desire, has everything to do with Sangha, or the association with the modes of nature. We want to associate those that have more elevated quality and character so that we can become more elevated in our quality and character. And conversely, while we respect living entities that have bad quality and bad character because they're souls, after all, but we don't keep close association with those persons. We respect them, but a little bit distant respect, and then intimately closely associate with those that are spiritually elevated. That's the translation of the verse. And I'm going to read a little bit from, there's a long purport for this verse. I'm just going to read 2 paragraphs. And there's a reason for reading the 2 paragraphs. Bhaktivedanta purport reads, in order to advance in spiritual understanding, remember the topic is humility precedes bhakti. In order to advance in spiritual understanding, one has to hear from authoritative sources about spiritual knowledge. One can understand the spiritual reality of spiritual life by following strict negative principles and by controlling the senses. To have control, it is necessary that one be nonviolent and truthful, refrain from stealing, abstain from sex life, and possess only that which is absolutely necessary for keeping the body and soul together. One should not eat more than necessary. We should not collect more paraphernalia than necessary. We should not talk unnecessarily with common men, and he should not follow the rules and regulations without purpose. To do the do's and avoid the don'ts and be clear what the purpose is. Just this morning I got a letter from somebody I've known since they were a little kid, and now they're married and they have a child on the way, and they're nervous. Like, how am I going to handle this because I'm not together? And then they're inviting it. So all that life preparation before begetting a child is opportunity for building strength and clarity and surety before you invite living entity to take shelter that you are then responsible for training. So they're nervous. So I composed a letter, haven't sent it yet, just to reassure them. You have good parents, you have a good compass. You know which way is north and which way is south. You have a good GPS system. Make sure the destination is in place, but also make sure that the purpose of why getting to that destination is important. Think the purpose behind the do's and the don'ts. That, something that's if there's a assuming we all accept that there's a higher reality, and our human life amongst all the different species of life is an opportunity to experience that and be situated there in that place of higher consciousness. So utilize your human form of life wisely. Don't misuse it. But as you're doing it wisely, don't just follow blindly. Don't neglect blindly either. But why? What's the purpose? That Bhakti, this whole thing is, there's humility that precedes Bhakti. I need to know why in order to do Bhakti. And need to go to the right sources so that I can know what to do once the why is there. I'm going to just read a little bit more and then we'll carry on. No, what Srila Prabhupada is doing here in his purport, it's just said that the Bhagavad Gita is his language. The Bhagavad Gita is like the undergraduate study. Srimad Bhagavatam is like the graduate study. That means everything you learn in undergraduate school, it doesn't change in graduate school. There's more details and more subtle applications of what you learned in undergraduate school. Just yesterday, I've become a senior citizen. And my hearing is going bad. From screeching microphones, too. That's one of the courses. And so I had a hearing test, and the fellow did his thing. And I said, how much education did you get to do what you just did? He said, on top of undergraduate school, 4 years. It's like becoming an MD, but he didn't have the stethoscope and the whole thing. But he had that level of education. 4 years on top of 4 years. So he's a certified guy. He knows what he's doing. To know what you're doing, you need a teacher. You can't just read books. You can't become an MD or a lawyer or a high court judge or a professor just by reading books. You got to hear from a person that knows. Especially spiritual knowledge. You have to hear from a person that knows. So what Prabhupada is doing in the purport here is taking the message of the undergraduate study and applying it in the graduate study level. That's what Bhagavatam is. It's very nice. It's very sweet. Srimad. Very, very attractive, very sweet text. So he's explaining from Bhagavad Gita. Some of you are a little familiar. There's 18 chapters, and chapter 13 is discussing items of knowledge. There's 20 items of knowledge. And he's now going to be discussing some of the simple principles of how you're going to know this higher reality anyways. There's knowledge, the process of knowledge, and there's the object. To know the object, you have to do the process properly. To have the process properly, you have to have simplicity, humility. I'm going to read. There are 18 qualities mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. You want to look it up later? It's chapter 13, verses 8 through 12. 18. among which is simplicity. One should be without pride. One should not demand unnecessary respect from others, and one should be nonviolent. Amanidam adambit vam ahimsa, taking the Sanskrit from that series of chapter 13 verses. Now, this is the graduate study, and here is the same verse from the undergraduate study, Bhagavad Gita. And in Bhagavad Gita, these same two words, amanitvam, adambitvam, humility and pridelessness. I'll say it again. in this chapter 13, I hope you don't mind little education in Bhagavad Gita. In chapter 13, Arjun asks 6 questions. And it's basically matter and spirit, matter and spirit, matter and spirit. Pretty simple. And so Kshetra and Kshetragya, the field of activities and the knower field of activity, matter and spirit. Purusha and Prakriti, Prakriti, matter. Purusha, the enjoyer of Prakriti, matter and spirit. And knowledge and the object of knowledge, matter and spirit. The purpose of the proper configuration of matter is to get to the object of knowledge. So these two and the other 16 are items of the process of knowledge, and it begins with humility and pridelessness. So the message for today's discussion is true humility precedes true bhakti. Now, there's a little recording. Let's see what happens. The sound system has been a little funny. The painting shown on the left is Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya came to give the chanting of the holy name for the Yuga Dharma, that means for spiritual perfection for the sage. And he is giving lessons, his shiksha, or instructions, in 8 verses, how the chanting can become perfected, how one's life can be perfected through access to the holy name. And this is a nice recording. This is Srila Prabhupada's voice. I hope it works. Okay. There's an embedded little icon on the right. It's Srila Prabhupada singing this verse. It's really nice. But there's 4 parts. Trin is the first word. Trin means straw. So how to chant, how to access bhakti through chanting. The first is the humility. Feeling oneself more insignificant than a blade of grass. Trin nadapi. More tolerant than a tree. Toror iva. Sahishnuna. More tolerant than a tree. Then amanina, same. Freed from the desire that others should honor you. Rather, be ready to honor others at all times. It's humility. Wanting to honor others, not wishing to be honored by others. Or coveting. People are going to pat me on the back and say, oh, you're such a good fellow. You sing so nicely, you dance very nicely, or you do something nicely. The lady that cooked the prasadam, you cooked so nicely. Doing things for the purpose of getting praise and distinction and honor, it inhibits bhakti. It's nice. We should honor and appreciate others. But doing things so that you get it, that blocks bhakti. It blocks access to that place of higher consciousness or the higher reality. Bhakti is a means to get to that. There's a place of higher reality. There's a higher reality. There is such a place in such a situation. I want it. Supposing you don't know what it is. Some people don't know what it is. Some people don't even care what it is, but some people do. I was just sharing in Carbondale, Southern Illinois University, was at the university, and one young fellow came up to me after a university class and said, I've been reading this book, that book, the other book, the other book, the other book, following the path of Buddhism. And I had this kind of esoteric experience. I experienced going beyond the limits of materialism. And it was very peaceful. All the static, the noise dialed down. And I felt euphoria. But then I felt drawn again to the material field because it was kind of lonely up there. There was no shelter. It was interesting. Sharing with you because it was interesting. He was really serious enough that he was given, the curtain was drawn back and he could experience what it's like beyond the affinity for matter, which is exactly what Devahuti is asking Kapila Dev. He experienced it, but then he was drawn back again to the material field because he was attached, and the other was lonely. So, because he'd been following Buddhism, Buddhism does not teach that there's a source of everything. It doesn't teach Brahman. It teaches void. The Vedas teach Brahman, not void. And then not only Brahman, but Para-Brahman. So that Para-Brahman reality can be accessed, that's what Lord Chaitanya's teaching is saying, by humility, by tolerance, by offering praise to others or appreciation for others without expecting any of that for oneself. That's humility. So here's what he said. Raising my hands, I declare, everyone please hear me string this verse, these 4 points, on the thread of the holy name and wear it on your neck for continuous remembrance. Now, here's a little photograph of deities in Vrindavan. How many here have been to Vrindavan? Nearly half. Those of you that haven't been to Vrindavan, may Krishna bless you. May you one day visit Vrindavan. Jai. May that happen one day. It's a very wonderful, holy place. And there's one place in the whole of Vrindavan that's very special. Many places very special. It's the place that's in between where Krishna and Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda lived. It's up on a hill called Nandagram. Now it's the palace up on top of a hill. It's a spectacular palace. And in between Nandagram and the place where Radharani lived, at Yavat, there's a grove of Kadamba trees. A grove of Kadamba trees. Kadamba trees are very tall, kind of like oak, hardwood, and they produce a flower that's round like a golf ball. It's a little smaller than a golf ball, but that's the shape of the flower. Very interesting, Kadamba flowers. So Krishna used to climb up the Kadamba tree because at the end of the day, when herding the cows, he'd climb up the tree and call through the flute, he'd call the names of the groups of cows. And they would just wait to hear the name of their group called, and they would moo and wag their tails and come running. And then the next group, and then the next group. And that was like the end of the day ecstasy for all the cows. And he did this at the top of a kadamba tree. Therefore, the area is called Ter Kadamba. Ter means to call, because he would call the cows playing upon his flute. It's a very sacred place. And one of our acharyas, named Rupa Goswami, he wrote much of his writings, I mentioned towards the very beginning, about bhakti, right there, because it's such a holy place. Ter Kadamba. It's a grove of Kadamba trees, and there's still a stand of Kadamba trees that are remaining. They didn't all get chopped down. And inside that grove of trees is these deities. The deities are deities of Krishna Balaram. Krishna is the darkish one on our left, or Balaram's left, our right. And Balaram is leaning on Krishna's shoulder. And above the altar, it's in the midst of this grove of Kadamba trees, is this verse you see in red letters across the top. Trinam, same trin means straw. And this is a verse that was written by one who looked up to Rupa Goswami. He was one of the Goswamis of Vrindavan, contemporary, but younger age. He looked up to Rupa Goswami as like, you're awesome. You're someone I want to be like. So the verse reads, it's written just on the altar, just above the deities. It's in Sanskrit, but this is the translation. Taking a blade of grass between my teeth, I repeatedly beg that birth after birth may I obtain the dust from Srila Rupa Goswami's lotus feet. And the person who's written this is Raghunath Das Goswami. I'm mentioning this because the same word trin is there, but it's with the straw in his teeth, because that's a sign of humility in Vedic culture. Holding a straw in your teeth before another person is abject humility. Looking up to one who is worthy of my taking shelter because he gives bhakti. He, the younger Goswami, felt he was receiving torrents and torrents and torrents and torrents of rain, of showers of very sweet bhakti from him. This same verse, this is Srila Prabhupada speaking on this verse, or writing on this verse, that lower than a downtrodden blade of grass, the painting on the left, this is in Jagannath Puri, and the painting is showing this old lady, village lady, wanting to see Jagannath deity in the Jagannath Puri temple. And there were so many people in the temple she couldn't see. She was so enthusiastic, super enthusiastic. She got up on the shoulders of Lord Chaitanya so she could see above the crowd. And the other fellow to the right, that's his servant, saying, Govindadas, saying, get down, what are you doing? You're standing on Lord Chaitanya's shoulders. And she's holding onto the Garuda Stamba, because Lord Chaitanya would stand towards the back. He was tall. He could see above the heads of everybody. The short lady couldn't. So she got on his shoulders. And Lord Chaitanya said, no, it's okay. The enthusiasm that she has, if only I had such enthusiasm to see Lord Jagannath, my life would become perfect. And then suddenly she recognized what she was doing. She felt embarrassed. She got down and fell at his feet. And what was I doing? She was spontaneously attracted. The humility of Lord Chaitanya was showing the enthusiasm for bhakti surpasses even following standard codes of conduct. It's so important. The painting on the right is showing Sanatana Goswami clasping Lord Chaitanya's feet, holding straw in his teeth, and asking some basic questions like, who am I? And the second question was, why am I forced to suffer the threefold miseries of material existence? I don't want them, and I have to experience them. Why? Why? The inquisitive spirit lends to bhakti. It's the pathway for bhakti. Sometimes those of you that go to Vrindavan, you'll see a scene like this. The scene is there are residents in Vrindavan that like paying obeisances. They take a stone and hold the stone and stretch their bodies out on the pavement. They put a little mat. This fellow has a straw mat, not like a padded mat, just extending his body and reaching as far as he can and placing a stone where his fingertips touch and paying obeisances, going all around Govardhan Hill. To go around Govardhan Hill this way takes weeks. And that's just one place. And sometimes the idea is they're reinforcing the mood of submission to Govardhan, Govardhan being non-different than Krishna. By that humility unto Krishna, submission unto Krishna, bhakti enters their heart or is nourished by that humility. And this fellow doesn't just take one stone, he has 108 stones. Then after all the 108, he puts his feet by where the far end is and then does it again 108 times. The reason for showing this illustration is some persons take very seriously the principle of accepting and cultivating the mood of humility so that their bhakti can grow, so that the love for Krishna that's in the heart becomes awakened. And then when love for Krishna becomes awakened, Krishna becomes attracted and may reveal himself. At least palpably one may feel the connection with Krishna. That's bhakti yoga, connection with Krishna through love. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. Here's a simple Brijbasi lady, probably not very wealthy, probably not very well educated, but very devoted. And I don't speak Hindi. Some of you speak Hindi. You meet some of these people and they're amazing, literally amazing, very, very amazing persons. And they take the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra very seriously because humility is necessary for awakening. Just a couple more points and I'm going to end. In many of our mantras, the word namaha is found. Namaha. Om Narayanaya Namaha. Namaha. What does namaha mean? The answer is found in Padma Purana. There's a verse that says what it means. It's submission. Ma represents ahankar. This is a translation from a Padma Purana verse. Here's the citation if you want to look it up later. Na is negation of ahankar. Thus, utter namaha, one negates one's independent attitude. The jiva is dependent on the Lord. He lives with dependence. One, therefore, should completely reject the idea of accomplishing by one's own capacity. Nothing is left to be accomplished by the ability of the Lord. Consigning one's body to the Lord, one should serve him. That's the namaha meaning. So this is an essential, fundamental, basic teaching that comes in spiritual life. Here's a little painting of the two brothers. We mentioned them both. Here's a painting of both of them. One is Rupa Goswami. The other is Sanatana Goswami. They both were born in a very elevated Brahmana family from South India. And they had enormous wealth without all the details. And they decided more important to them was this quest for this higher consciousness, higher reality, higher truth. So they let go of those worldly things and took the simple life of mendicants living in Vrindavan. Behind them is the temple of Madan Mohan. And they lived their life very simply, giving teachings of bhakti, which are available in translations, English translations. This is a photo of a murti of Haridas Thakur, who was the acharya for the chanting of the holy name. Because of time, I was going to tell one more story. Haridas Thakur was not born in a elevated family. These other two, Rupa and Sanatan, were elevated by birth and by education and by everything. Haridas Thakur was a very simple man, born in a Muslim family, but from his get-go, in his childhood, he had attraction for chanting Krishna's name. And he was honored and praised and adored by the Vaishnavas because of his total absorption in the holy name. And he had full realization of the scripture from the chanting of the holy name. And he had all good qualities, such as humility, in the course of his prosecuting his spiritual life. He was revered by everyone. Now, I was just going to narrate a story, but I think I'm not going to do it. From Mahabharata, some of you know the story of Ekalavya. So let's see how things go. I think I'd like to stop and let's see how the discussion goes. Because from my experience, the best part of any time spent like this is the question and answer and discussion. That's the best part. You've been very patient hearing me going on and on and on, so thank you. But now your turn. You can ask and we'll discuss and we'll see where the discussion goes. The theme again, true humility precedes true bhakti. True bhakti is the means, according to Bhagavad Gita, is the means to access Krishna. Krishna says, nobody knows me, but my devotee knows me. Because he reveals himself to his devotee. All of the discussion of humility is to invite the descending mercy of Krishna to come into our lives, and as he so desires, to reveal some things about himself to us. And those who are devotees can feel it, can experience it, feel it, and palpably live their lives in devotion to Krishna, in whatever it is that one's calling in material life, in this worldly life is. Devotion to Krishna is the ornament of that devotee. Let's see if there's some discussion. Am I doing better with sound? Yeah? Thank you.
Guruji, I think we can sit here and hear to you all day, feeling very blessed. So, how do we seek to have a guru who can actually lead us through this? The theme that you're talking about, how to be humility preceding bhakti, or in general, how do we seek to have a guru?
Okay, nice question. Well, the starting point is what you already said. That is, Brahma Jigyasa, being inquisitive. When the desire is there, because there is the Supreme, and when the desire is there to connect with the Supreme, he'll send someone. Sadhu Sangha is a gift, a descending gift from the Supreme. And then it is up to each of us, you, me, and every one of us, to become at least reasonably familiar with the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, because the teachings of Bhagavad Gita gives the qualities, or alankar, the lakshana, the characteristics of someone who is in that category. So we become a little bit familiar. We have the experience of someone that sadhu like, at least it seems outside sadhu like. What's the inside? You hear from them, observe their behavior, and is there alignment what they say and what they do, their prachar and their achar, with the statements of descending knowledge? And if there's an alignment, one should examine according to those characteristics. And if there's a match between what they say and what they do, and what the scripture says, and the indications, the characteristics of scripture, then the bell rings. There's another criterion that's within the scripture, and that is disciplic succession. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, during Krishna's time, there are many holy men, very many learned persons. But according to what Krishna says to Arjuna, in course of time, the disciplic succession was broken, yoga nashta. And because the system of disciplic succession was broken, Krishna says, chapter 4, Bhagavad Gita, I'm now going to present it again to you. Same old knowledge. Not new, but disciplic succession is another essential element in examining, who is a qualified person. First, we'll do it one more time, briefing. The desire to know. And then Krishna will send. Then I have responsibility to know what scripture says, what are the characteristics of such a qualified person, how they speak, and how they behave, achar and prachar. And is there alignment? Are they consistently speaking what the knowledge of transcendence speaks? They just say that. They don't say something else. And is their conduct consistent with the conduct of what Scripture says? If one who has this quality, this is their behavior, this is their speech, how they walk, specifically, how they talk, how they act. And so I examine in the light of the alignment with those teachings. And then there's disciplic succession. And then you're in good shape. You can trust that source. Anything else? Yes.
Jai Shri Krishna, Guruji. Thank you for the beautiful discourse. My question is, you had said early on that higher reality means different things for different people.
Yes,
So
definitely.
as learned as you are, I would love to know what that means for you. What does higher reality mean for you? And the second part of the question is, for a common person like me for whom spirituality is a wishful goal, and I'm still in the materialistic world, what should higher reality mean for people like me? Thank you.
Very pragmatic question. There's the objective and there's subjective. The objective is what Scripture says, and the subjective is what it means to me. And your question is what it means to me, not just what Scripture says. A relationship with the source of everything. That's what it means to me. A personal relationship. It's like I discussed some time back of this young woman, but I've known her since she's a little girl, for so many years. And now she's has her own child on the way. So, but I haven't sent it yet. But the why isn't important to you. You have a child in your womb. You don't know boy or girl, and what's going to happen when the boy or girl comes out? You're nervous. That was the letter. So why is it important? And to make the connection, the why connection, the why comes before the what, and the how. You know that little message. So we all want to love and be loved, and I also want to love and be loved. And the supreme lovable that can reciprocate lovingness perfectly, not partially, is the supreme person. So that's what it means to me. And here's a little detail. I've been practicing a life of devotion to Krishna for 56 years now. And I'll leave it to your imagination, but there's something palpable. You can't do what I'm doing for 56 years unless there's something tangible, something personal. So it's the reciprocation of that loving exchange. No, not excluding, or say it differently, very important is my spiritual master. Back to her question. A big part of my relationship with Krishna is serving Krishna through my spiritual master. And it's the connection is real. It's not fiction or imagination. So there's the two, the spiritual master and the Bhagavan, the supreme person, the personal feature of the supreme. And it goes nonstop. Now, the second question, what should you characterize yourself in a humble way? But we're all in the material world. And we're all dealing with stuff. And stuff is sometimes pleasing and sometimes displeasing and sometimes smooth and sometimes bumpy and sometimes because it's the nature of the place. But the one of the ways I would recommend for you is to ask the question, who am I? Because the degree to which you can understand who I am, you can get an idea of who is the supreme. Because the individual soul is the tiny, tiny, tiny sample, the spark of the big blazing fire, or the drop of water in the ocean, or the little tiny, tiny part of the supreme. So qualitatively, we're one with. So what are the spiritual, not material, but spiritual qualities of you? That's who you are. And you introspect, or through the guidance of Scripture, introspect. You eternal, full of bliss and knowledge, according to the Scripture. So, do I feel that? I feel the temporary. What about that which isn't temporary? You start to go in a reflective, introspective way, and you'll start to understand things about the Supreme that are just intuitive. And then, guided by Scripture, then it starts to focus, kind of like bringing a lens from out of focus to you adjust it, it becomes very clear and sharp. So the supreme for a person that's in the world is to recognize that we're not of this world. We're in the world, but not of the world. Like this saying, wanting to love and be loved. It's not just a human thing. It's a spiritual thing. Birds and beasts and fish and insects, they have some tendency like that because it's of the soul. And just you have to start looking around, learn lessons from nature, but learn lessons from introspection and the guidance of Scripture. And then, same with her question, someone that can guide you. And there's wisdom literature that can guide any one of us from the perfect person, supreme person, Bhagavad Gita speaking, Krishna speaking, and then through disciplic succession, the message being transmitted transparently. Then you don't have to find with a flashlight. It's revealed. But introspection through the assistance of wisdom literature and take shelter of the holy name, because that's the primary means for the stage. I included it purposely towards the very beginning, where Kapila is speaking in the previous age, where chanting of the holy name was not the primary means, but it's central. The chanting of the holy name, sincerely, calling. And then there's reciprocation. Okay. Nice question. Thank you. How are we doing? Anybody else here would like to discuss something? Yeah. Up front.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I was thinking that in order for me to have true humility, there needs to be a recognition or acknowledgement of qualities in the other person that are aspirational for myself.
Actually, what?
That are aspirational for myself.
Okay.
So when we are in the association of devotees, it's easier to have that because, they're there, I'm here, so that comes naturally. But when you are with people whose general direction or qualities are not aspirational for you, the sense of humility seems a little bit forced. It's not consistent, it's not spontaneous. Yeah. So what lens can I use so that, I can see, even for people where their qualities may not be aspirational for me, that sense of humility is still spontaneous and consistent.
Okay, nice question. It's very practical. These are 3 practical questions. We'll go back to the first instructions that Krishna gives in Bhagavad Gita, which are dealing with matter and spirit and the controller of both. It's Sankhya, and we belong to the category of spirit. We don't belong to the category of matter. And qualities of others are matter, generally speaking, unless you find a sadhu. The qualities of others are in the field of the material energy. So I may be more attracted to this quality, let's say mode of goodness quality. I may be attracted to that and less attracted to the other. Exactly as Kapila said, while respecting and never envying anyone in this material field, you make close affinity with those that are spiritually elevated. So those that are not spiritually elevated, respect goes to the spiritual quality that's within, that's covered by the modes of nature. Like bodies, clothing covers bodies. So the material nature covers the innate quality of the soul. So some may be more attractive, some may be less attractive, and some may be repulsive. That's the modes of nature. Upper, middle, and lower. Goodness, passion, and ignorance. Recognize, repeat, that the qualities that you may be attracted to or not so attracted to have so much to do with material nature. So go beyond how to see properly. Just go to the spiritual conception. Then, okay, how do I get to the spiritual conception? By spiritual practice, by abhyasa in the language of Bhagavad Gita, by practice. Practice spiritual practices, recommended, recognized, standard spiritual practices. and you, by spiritual practices, two things happen, which is what you're looking for. The coverings become reduced, and the spiritual reality becomes awakened by proper spiritual practice, sincere spiritual practice. Misconceptions are reduced, and proper conception is awakened. Coverings become reduced, and the true nature becomes awakened. So you can see yourself as an instrument with other people that don't have higher qualities, as an instrument to help them come to the stage of higher qualities. And that's a service that you can do. Respectfully engage in service to the Supreme. So if your connection with the Supreme is well established, or on the way of being established, then you're a servant of, an instrument of, and a servant of the Supreme, moving about amongst people that have lower modes of nature, but recognizing intrinsically there's a spiritual quality within. And that's easier said than done, but that's the method mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. Let's see if there's maybe one more question. I think we're going to end. It's a nice assembly. Yeah.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Hare Krishna Maharaj.
He's dialing. Just go ahead, speak.
I had a question about the translation of Kapil Dev talking to Devahuti, where he says that we should avoid the company of those who are not spiritually advanced. So I was wondering how this concept applies to relationships where you have close company who's not spiritually advanced, but you're both working towards bhakti, so you have your own struggles with bhakti. Is close company of such individuals recommended or detrimental to your bhakti?
No. Let me rephrase your question to make sure I've understood your question. You're not speaking about unwholesome. You're speaking about those that are not spiritually advanced. And your question is, those that are wholesome but not spiritually advanced, is it detrimental? No, it's not detrimental. That together you're progressing towards the goal. I'm not spiritually advanced. You're not spiritually advanced. Let's be buddies. We'll work towards the goal. And you're sincere and I'm sincere. And if you start to nod out and head for the ditch, please allow me to tap you on the shoulder and say, excuse me, but you're heading for the ditch. And you won't yell at me. We haven't broken our friendship by saying you're heading in the wrong direction. Yeah, oh boy, if you can do that, that's really fantastic. Thank you so much. So it's not a detrimental kind of association. It's a good association. Just be honest with yourself where you are, and be with people that are, somewhat at least honest with themselves where they are, and together you're progressing towards, where you want to go. And you have good guides in case you get lost. Your GPS will put you back on track. Okay. Our host, fantastic assembly, big space. And I expected, when I came in here, I expected the acoustics would be terrible, but I can hear everybody. And I've had bad hearing. So well done. Fantastic. And for those of you that are your friends that are not so acquainted with ISKCON and Hare Krishna movement, thank you all very much for coming, and you can take away something with you from this little discussion. True humility precedes true bhakti. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.